This series from the State Library of Victoria, Conversations with Writers. My name is Astrid Edwards. I am the host of two bookish podcasts, The Garret, Writers on Writing, where I talk to the best writers in Australia, and also Anonymous Was a Woman, where I talk with Jamila Rizvi about all things bookish. Today, it is an utter delight to be chatting with Christos Tsiolkas. Christos, welcome.
Thank you so very much, Astrid. It's an absolute delight as well. I just wish we could be in the same physical space.
One day we will, Christos. I have to say, you aren't on social media, and it is lovely to get a tiny little peek into where you might write or your home. So thank you.
Well, actually, I have to explain to people viewing this that this isn't actually where I write. This is our kitchen, but my computer, my big computer, just decided to die. So I've got my laptop. And it's a very beautiful garden that my partner Wayne has made. So it really hasn't been burdensome as it has for a lot of other people this period of isolation. It's been strange and perplexing, but not, I'm feeling quite fortunate.
It is such a time, Christos, when I am sitting at home trying to fathom what is happening around me, I turn to books and I turn to the people who write those books. Now, I don't think that you have all of the answers, but
certainly don't.
But I've been really excited to pick your brains about what you are thinking about what has happened, to our state, to our country, to the people everywhere this year. So I'd like to take you back to January of this year. You were coming off the back of Damascus, which won the Victorian Premier's Literary Prize, your most recent novel, currently shortlisted for quite a few other awards. And January saw not the typical January that we're used to. We have the bushfires. Take me back there, even though it feels like forever ago.
Another world. Look, it was an absolutely frightening time and an absolutely enraging time, and where there is a connection to this time, an absolutely perplexing time as well. Look, lots of friends who live on the south coast of New South Wales, and they were in direct line of the fires, and I just remember that New Year's Eve of absolute anxiety, texting friends, and then the lines went dead, the phones went out. And just realising that my partner Wayne, he's actually been an environmentalist for decades, and he has been questioning and asking questions and being so disturbed about what we're doing to climate for a long time. So it's not that I've not been aware of it, but I think this year, that January, 5 months ago, whatever it is now, it was stark that something had tipped over and something had to change. But maybe so that I remember that particular night, that New Year's Eve, when I thought people I knew touchwood could lose their lives, and there's Cobargo, the town that people did lose their lives in and was absolutely devastated by the fires. That broke my heart because I love that town. So there was that sadness, and then there was that anger as well. I felt absolutely furious that our bloody country and our governments had screwed up any opportunity to do something about this issue for so long. So you're taking me back to that moment, but it's impossible not to reflect on that moment through what's happening now, Astrid. And I wrote about this. It's the only thing I've really written about this period. We were in the UK, in Scotland, got the call that we should come back, just realised that the world was changing because of COVID-19. And there's a moment in Dubai airport when there were people from the four corners of the globe, right? And everyone was panicking and everyone just wanted to go home. And I was looking around and I was looking at myself and going, where did we get this idea that we could travel so promiscuously? Where do I get off blaming people in their Mac mansions, people when I have been flying for the last decade to various places? And as I said, promiscuously, just assuming that this was a birthright. And I think that's a real big change this present situation has made me focus on is to think about things like that, where we each have our individual responsibility. Because you and I have talked about this, we're not strangers to each other. I think the last period of culture and politics has been a lot of blame, and there are absolutely right reasons for why we need to do the j'accuse. But it's meaningless if you do it out of a position where you can't look at yourself in the mirror and be honest about what you are doing in relationship to all these questions.
Christos, you are a phenomenal writer, and I enjoy reading your novels, but you inspire me because you are a cultural critic, you are a reviewer, you are a thinker in Australia that has in the past spoken truth to power, or put your thoughts in paper, like you did in that article that you're referring to that was in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. I think one of the things that really struck out for me that you've done in the last couple of years is you got a review of Francis Fukuyama's book Identity, and you had that published in what is essentially it's Australian Foreign Affairs, and it's a policy journal for international policy wonks, right? Like, this doesn't have a big audience, but I read that journal and I saw you as an artist and a writer in that journal, writing an essay on a really important book that the people in power in Australia might read, because that's the journal that they read. And so your opinions as a thinker and a writer, I feel, are so relevant to the bushfires and to COVID-19 and to what's happening in our art sector and our economy right now. So your thoughts on these things, Christos, I think people care about, and people are interested in what you think. So you were in overseas, was it in February or March when you were in the UK?
It was March. It was we landed in London on March 9th and flew back out on the 18th, I think it was.
And you were supposed to go to writers' festivals and they were cancelled, and yeah. It
was also meant to be our Wayne's and my 35th anniversary, so that.
Congratulations.
And we came straight back into quarantine, and we've got a lovely home, and we are really lucky. I know that. So I felt like that's all right, given what could have happened and given what the situation is in the world. I've got nothing to complain about. Astrid, it's very generous what you've said, and those non-fiction, let me call them interventions that I do, they really take the most work in terms of me as a writer. Fiction is pleasure. Fiction is also labour and hard work, and sometimes you're pulling your hair out. But it's a different form of expression, and there's a different freedom to it, and there's also a different responsibility to it. That with non-fiction, it feels like I am so conscious of say climate change, right? There are so many more people who are expert in their knowledge. I don't want to come from a position of pretending that I have that kind of expertise, and I think opinion is at its weakest when it pretends that expertise. What you want to do is be able to express. Look, this is what I think. Express something about the current moment that you think is not being heard, that pushes me to write.
So there was a public piece, and I believe it was, early April, and you were quoted along with several other kind of prominent Australians with your thoughts about this moment in time, but also, the stimulus package and it kind of leaving out a lot of the art sector. We're about a month on from that. I look around the industry and I'm horrified by what's happening to my friends and my colleagues. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, look, I think it is absolutely terrifying for everyone I know who has lost their job or is fearful of, in a month and a half, maybe losing their job if they haven't now, right? I think this is a stupendous moment and a terrifying moment. Astrid, to be really honest, I can't make that clear division between the arts and other people. Like, I know so many writers, I know so many artists, I know so many theatre workers, I know but I also know people who are working in a variety of other fields. Whether it's in the education field, whether they're cleaners, whether they're working in shops, and that's just as painful and difficult. So, in a sense, I don't want to make that separation between them. What strikes me as a change in my thinking from even a month and a half ago is I want to concentrate on the local. I can't bear to read at the moment from US fiction, for example. Not that, and that sounds much more damning. Of course it is very damning, but it's like the preoccupations of only a few months ago don't seem as relevant now. I actually want to read about my world. And I think people are really hungry to read about this world. There are going to be huge questions that we need to ask and be organised as artists, for example, around how does arts funding happen in the future? Who does it go to? Does it go to frontline theatre workers rather than playwrights, for example? Because should there be a connection to full-time, permanent, part-time, full-time staff in theatre houses, for example, that's tied to money? A whole series of questions about labour, So I feel like an old school socialist in saying that, but I shouldn't feel like it. I mean, I think these are really, really going to become pertinent questions about how we create a community that supports the most vulnerable members of the community. One of the most astonishing moments of this period was, and I'm not, I don't want to name her because she would be absolutely embarrassed. There's a family friend who is my mother's age, and she's always been so supportive of me being a writer, and she's just always encouraged me, even when I didn't have success. She'd always say to my mum and dad, Christos is all right, just that he wants to do what he wants to do, that you should let him do it. And the other day I was speaking to her on the phone, and she said to me, we were talking about this situation, and she's fearful because 2 of the children have lost their jobs. And we were talking about globalization. And she said, and it's the only time in decades where she's asked something of me, and she said, what you have that we don't have, and she used the collective noun, is a voice. And you should be telling people, and I think she meant fellow writers and artists, that globalization's failed us. And I was really touched and moved by that, Astrid, because that is what people are feeling on the ground. And I think that is something we need to all ask ourselves about the economic system we've been living in for the last 25, 30, longer years, and ask about those failures and what connects us, regardless if we're a writer, regardless if we're a cleaner, regardless if we're a nurse, regardless of whatever our work or our future might be. Does that make sense? I was really, really moved by that question.
Christos, it does make sense. And I feel like it reminds me of that one article that you have published in lockdown, in that you mentioned unemployment as this area that we kind of know is there, and it's impacting a lot of people now, but we haven't thought through what that means and the short-term, medium-term, long-term consequences of that. And I think you wrote it in this idea of like fear of the future. It's not the great dystopian apocalypse that might come that we see in The Walking Dead or whatever. It's the day-to-day labor or lack of employment or underemployment that is truly terrifying.
Oh, look, you'd have to be such a mate, you would have to be such an idiot to do any future prediction at the moment, right? Given that we are talking literally here, 3 months ago, no one saw this coming, and that first few days being in the UK, we were going out, we were drinking, we were hugging people. It happened so quickly. So what is the future? I've been conscious that, one of the things that sometimes makes me hesitate about intervening in this way is my age, because I think there there is that notion of going quietly to the shed or to that, which is not I've been enjoying the stillness of this moment, but I'm not 22, I'm not 26, I'm not 31. That's a different, that's a different age.
Christos, I'm just going
to... Sorry, Astrid, just because I don't want to lose this thought, but I have lived through a recession and I have seen what it's done materially and physically and emotionally to people I love. And that is a fear that I'm taking into the future.
Christos, I am not 22 or 26 or 31 anymore, and I am of a different generation than you, but please do not go quietly to the shed and sit in stillness. We need voices from everyone, and I put your voice in there. I want to go back to what your family friend, the older lady, mentioned that really did affect you, and it's quite an intimate and kind of horrifying story, but also it puts the onus on artists, on writers in particular. Now, Christos, you are the patron of Writers Victoria, and you are a writer yourself. You have a voice. Is there a responsibility for writers now in this time?
Oh, look, I think there is always been, nothing's really changed. I was thinking about the greater changes that, I've been a fortunate generation, right? I've not experienced the suffering of war. I've not experienced those that cataclysmic horror that has affected so many people who are immigrants and refugees to this country, for example. But, I saw the end of the Cold War. I saw AIDS. I saw September 11th, 2001. So there have been those big events that have changed the way we are in the world. I think that there has always been a sense I've had as Christos Tsiolkas, there's a certain responsibility entailed in having a voice, in having a public forum, in having had the fortune to be able to be something called a writer. And that's about class. And I think that whatever class I'm now, and I'm not that working class young person I was, but I am connected to that. And that's why that old woman's plea is so important, because she's right. The tragedy of class is that a lot of people don't have the ability to do what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So yes, I've always felt that responsibility of responding to the time and the world and to injustice, but I don't expect that of every writer, right? Because not everyone is that kind of writer. And if we assume that everyone should be that kind of writer, I'm fearful of that as well. I'm fearful of demanding certain. Not everyone can be that kind of writer. Not everyone wants to be that writer. The best thing about fiction, and again, this is where it's been different in my experience to non-fiction, is that fiction also can be dangerous. Fiction can ask questions that are really hard to ask. Fiction can make you really bloody uncomfortable. Yeah. And fiction can make you wonder, well, it can make you doubt. And, I've just finished a book that took me a long time that is full about it is about faith and it is about doubt. And I said on the weekend in another forum, that to me seems the most important thing I can do as a fiction writer at the moment, is to hold both faith and doubt in equal balance. And I do think that is something we should all be doing. I'm not on social media, and the last couple of weeks I've wondered maybe I should be, and then as soon as I have that thought, I know that would be absolutely the wrong thing to do, because you can't respond. I don't think you can do this. You can't have a conversation on social media.
I'm interested in your thoughts about what might come out, not instantly, not this week, not even this year, but the literature that will come out of this crisis. So I, cast my mind back to, the great works that came out of the Depression, which started with the Great Crash. And I was thinking of the writers in the 30s, Virginia Woolf and John Steinbeck with The Grapes of Wrath and all of the rest of them. They took years to produce the works that reflected that experience that, are still on our school curriculums today. So you're saying we can't respond quickly, and I agree with you, but what do you think, how could we respond in the years to come?
I think some people will respond quickly. It's just been my experience that, to respond thoughtfully, which is different to responding quickly, is to take time. So that's going to be. I was talking with a friend about this just the other day, because we were talking about living through different times. And for example, there was a spate of films and books and novels straight after the 2001 and the bombing of New York. And a lot of them were absolutely crap because they hadn't been time to really make sense of something that was immense. I think that the whole question of what has been these long decades of neoliberalism that we've been living through, what does it mean to separate the world between the local and the cosmopolitan? What are the tensions, between globalization and borders? These were questions before the COVID-19 crisis. The COVID-19 crisis has kind of accelerated their import. But I think the great works of fiction will come out of addressing those questions. It's not that they weren't there before, but now we're just really, really conscious of how they affect us materially, physically. No one was. Oh, that's not quite true, because I think there were people who knew that something like this could happen. There were scientists, there were people who understood this, but for most of us, we had no idea. We didn't see this coming, and but we have an inkling of things that were not right in our world. We knew that there were sufferings and greed, and that was really destructive to what we had. So, what do we do as writers? We will write about that. We will struggle. We will make mistakes. We will write some great books. We will write a lot of bad books. That won't change. I do hope that there is something that we've recognised about the local that is not merely rhetoric. But I don't know if that's. We won't be able to see until 6 months, a year in. I'd like to believe that you can go to writers' festivals in 2021 and 2022, and it won't be big name stars from America talking about their president, and their issues, and their identities. I really hope to God, Astrid, that that's not what happens. It probably will be, but I hope that there's an understanding that we're writing a different kind of English and we write from a different kind of world, and that maybe we should be listening to each other.
And our experience on this side of the world is so very different to what's happening in America at the moment. I'm far from an anti-American. I am so passionate about popular culture. I cannot but love a culture that produced gospel and jazz, right? And the 20th century literature of the United States is one of my great passions and loves. But this has really shown us that we are not the United States. We're influenced by them, but we're not that. So what are we? That grappling of that question is an important question in terms of what we take into the future now. And writers, we are at our best when we're grappling with that. Not when we have answers to that, but when we're actually grappling with that and trying to make sense of it. Is this a creative time for you, Christos? Have you found yourself wanting to write?
It took me a while, Astrid, because I think there was that kind of shock of, oh my God, anything I'm going to say. What do you write? And then I have been writing. I started. I was thinking about this. I was having a conversation with you in my head before. You know, that often happens in things like this, right? So and I've started a novel that's contemporary, and that's partly a reaction to, you know, being locked into the past 2,000 years ago of Damascus, but also, and I mean this quite truthfully, because I've loved writing about the past, and there's kind of a hankering to do more of that. And I thought, well, maybe this will be a contemporary novel, and maybe it'll be the last one I do for a while. Who knows? I've been really about 4 years ago now. Michelle de Kretzer said to me, maybe we've only got a finite number of novels in us, and that's really stayed with me. But maybe there's a limit.
Christos, as a reader of both your works and Michelle's, I hope that is not true. Very, very clearly. When you were writing Damascus, I know that you changed your reading, and as part of your preparation for that novel, that historical novel, you only read works about that time, translated from that time. You've mentioned that you're enjoying the stillness and that you're enjoying, you know, kind of engaging with the local and maybe not the international literary world or books. What have you been reading? Where have you been going for refuge?
Look, I've actually, to be really honest, I've fallen in love with a 2-volume set, which is a biography of Elvis Presley, Last Train to Memphis and Careless Love. And it's just because it's a great epic story that I thought I knew, and I realised I didn't. I've actually made a decision at the beginning of the year, it must have been, that I was going to read all of Jean Genet's writing, and that's been a real pleasure. I'm actually up to his final book now, The Prisoner of Love, so I'm really looking forward to finishing that. And then I hope that I will. I took out Summerlock Elliott the other day, the Australian writer, and I think I may do a little bit of exploration of the writing of that period, because I think it's a period of Australian writing, let's say the interwar years, that often gets forgotten now, you know, in terms of there's a lot, and I think he's been damned a bit because he was a popular writer, but I read actually for the first time late last year, Careful He Might Hear You, and I was knocked over by the simplicity and the grace and the power of that novel. So that's where my head is. I feel a little mean that I'm not reading contemporary novels at the moment, and I know that I will go back to the contemporary, but I do feel a certain wanting to take a break from the contemporary. Do you think that's a problem? It must be a problem.
I think that anyone who is reading is doing the right thing, and I don't actually think that, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Christos, I teach at RMIT, and sometimes I don't have a good answer for my students, and my students ask me what they should be doing or writing or reading or thinking now. And, you know, we're about to wrap up, but when you think about the young writers around now who are, you know, in lockdown, can't go to the library, can't go to their classes, what would you say to them?
Oh, look, you know, this is a perfect opportunity to read, and one of the great joys of this last period is I've just over the weekend I watched the Pressburger Powell film, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which I have been meaning to watch for decades, and it is a masterpiece. I watched the Murnau silent film, The Last Laugh, which is astonishing. I mean, I've forgotten that watching silent cinema is like a completely different experience. I reread the Pauline Kael essay on Citizen Kane, Raising Cain, and I was knocked over by the breadth of her knowledge. She knows philosophy, she knows politics, she knows art, she knows film. And I think if there was one thing I would like to say to your students is please read widely. actually, and to read, to move from fiction. There will always, I will always love fiction, but also to read philosophy, to read economics, to read political science, to read art theory. I worry that breadth of knowledge is something that we're not encouraging, and I mean that collectively. I worry that we're all in the danger of not understanding how important it is to be fully rounded in the way we read.
I adore that. Thank you for saying that, Christos. Christos, we've come to the end of our chat, but before we go, thank you for your time, and also good luck tonight. I know that Damascus is shortlisted for the Australian Book Industry Awards that are announced at 4 o'clock today. So thank you for your time. Good luck.
An absolute pleasure. An absolute pleasure to see you, Astrid. I hope next time we can do it face to face, because it is
absolutely.
I'm missing that. a lot.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Christos. Bye.
Bye-bye.